Hi guys, Kidru64 here, and today we're going to be talking about The Last Blockbuster, which is a documentary you can currently find on Netflix. It was added a couple weeks ago. Of course, I bought the physical media, Blu-ray. What do you know? And this review is going to be a little bit different than some of the other reviews, I think, and that I'm just going to have a discussion about this. I'm just going to talk about what I think about the movie, also what I think about Blockbuster, because as I mentioned multiple times on this channel, I am a former employee at Blockbuster, so I worked there for almost 5 years, so I have some experience working at Blockbuster, so I identify with this movie on that level. And yeah, it was kind of a nice nostalgia trip, which is kind of what the documentary tries to evoke, a nostalgia trip. So in some areas it succeeds, some areas it doesn't, and it all depends on how nostalgic you are for the rental store and Blockbuster as to how much you're going to get out of this movie. But we're going to get into that and more before we get started. Get ready for this commercial break.
Imagine the perfect video store. It would have a great selection, right? Right! Over 10,000 videos. 3 evening rentals, so no rush, no hassle. Fast checkout. 24-hour quick drop return. Open late every night. Well, the perfect video store...
Welcome to Blockbuster Video!
...is popping up all over the country. There's one near you.
Blockbuster Video! Wow, what a difference!
So I hope you guys like that. I had fun shooting that. Obviously, I shot that around my set using the old Blockbuster commercial and just kind of overlaying my own stuff over it. It was a lot of fun to make. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Obviously, we're skipping the opening title sequence, and I gave you the commercial instead. Again, a lot of fun making that. I was definitely inspired to do something after watching the documentary. As I said, your nostalgia for Blockbuster is a big part of whether you're going to enjoy this or not. So the way I'm going to do my review is I'm just going to talk about the documentary, certain things in the documentary. We just have a discussion. So the one thing that I thought was really cool was just the opening sequence. The opening sequence, you just have shots going down the aisle. That's it. Just going down the aisles at the Blockbuster, and it just... You know, I hadn't really seen that in a very long time. Now, there are certain shots in the documentary where they take like this model that somebody made of the Blockbuster, and I thought that was so cool. Every time they showed that model, I was like, that's pretty sweet. I want that in my set. Like, I want that back there. I want this big model of the Blockbuster behind me because it was cool. It was even detailed on the inside. Whoever made that, props to you. They have like little stick figures and stuff that they cut to also. So it kind of made the documentary have this like low budget feel to it, and I liked that aspect of the documentary. Just every time it showed these cutaways to that kind of stuff, I was like, yeah, I like this. I like the style here. Unfortunately, I'd say about halfway through the documentary, they seemingly gave up on it, so that was kind of disappointing. But you know, while those parts that they did show, I enjoyed. They definitely nailed the checkout. Just showing the POS. The POS system for Blockbuster was terrible. It was terrible, guys. You had this blue screen, and you had like yellow and purple and white lettering on it, and I had to get new glasses every single year while using this stupid thing. It was terrible. There were these old IBM computers, and this Blockbuster is operating with the same ones. I mean, they got better monitors than what I had, because I had the giant IBM monitors. But other than the monitors, the computers themselves are the same. They're the old IBMs, and they even talk about that in the documentary where she has to go into the back room and cannibalize old computers that they got from Blockbusters that had closed. And eventually what's going to happen is they're going to have to revamp their entire system, because eventually this stuff's not going to work anymore. They don't have the parts for this. So their whole POS system, they're eventually going to have to redo from the ground up, essentially. So Sandy is the manager at the Last Blockbuster, and you know, just based on this documentary and the interviews with people that, you know, work with her and stuff, she's the reason why that store is still open. Like, she clearly has a passion for the store. Like, she clearly has a passion for the employees, and she's maintained, without her, that thing would just wouldn't be functioning. It wouldn't. Like I said, she knows how to cannibalize these old computer parts, but more so it's the passion. She even like goes around to Targets and Walmarts and stuff before release day to get as many copies of the movies as she can to put up on the shelf. And that's crazy. She doesn't have the same kind of distribution that obviously Blockbuster had back in the day, which I could do a whole video talking about how the Blockbuster distribution worked, because their whole system was actually pretty good at one point. But regardless, she doesn't have that system in place, so she has to go get these movies, and she'll buy them at Target, pay full price for them, and put them out on the shelf so customers have the option of renting. And I'm going to hope and assume that eventually that she gets her money back on those. The Blockbuster model, kind of function on the fact that you would get the bulk items at low cost. But so I'm kind of interested how that all works, but I'm assuming that it does. Otherwise, they still wouldn't be in business. But again, like Sandy's clearly passionate for Blockbuster. The manager there is passionate for Blockbuster. One thing that I wish that they would have done in the documentary is interview other employees. Like they obviously they do interview some employees, but they spend a lot of time interviewing like the B-list celebrities, C and D-list celebrities. I know most of them, but I'm also a giant movie geek who loves TV, and I recognize pretty much everybody talking. But to some passive person, they're probably not going to know half of these people. They're going to know Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith, they use him on the thumbnail on Netflix right now, holding up the Last Blockbuster disc, because people know Kevin Smith, so they're kind of using his face, I guess, to lure people into it because it's the most recognizable face. I like Kevin Smith. I love the earlier Kevin Smith movies. I like Clerks 2, Mallrats, Jay and Silent Bob, some of his earlier stuff. I even like the new Jay and Silent Bob reboot. I thought was pretty good for the most part. There was parts of the movies I thought was really boring. But regardless, I like Kevin Smith. Have you ever met Kevin Smith? So I did write down some of the people because I knew I'd forget them. So I'm just going to read them off right here. So Kevin Smith, yeah. The guy from The League, which is Andre, which I love The League. The League is a great show if you've never seen it. The voice of Obi-Wan, who's James Arnold Taylor. He's the voice of Obi-Wan in the Clone Wars series. And he just seems like a really cool guy. He should definitely have a YouTube channel if he doesn't. He just seems like he has a good personality for that. He just seems like a cool guy. Jamie Kennedy was in it. And the thing that I think Jamie Kennedy I thought was a good idea because he actually tied into the documentary, and that I had no idea he actually was hired as this crew of Blockbuster people who filmed stuff, filmed in stores, and they had these little skits and shorts and episodes or whatever that they'd play in Blockbuster with the Blockbuster crew, and it had Jamie Kennedy was one of them. So I guess that was his start essentially, which I thought was funny. And also Andre from The League, he ties in pretty well because he actually worked at Blockbuster. He worked there. He talks about some things that he did when he worked there, and it's cool. So those characters those characters, those guys, those actors, the celebrities that they're interviewing, it makes sense as to why they would, because they actually have something to say about Blockbuster. But the majority of the rest of them just kind of talk about their memories of Blockbuster and stuff like that. And that's all well and good, but I think they overplay it. I do think that they used way too many interview clips in the documentary. I obviously was way more interested in what was actually happening at the store when they talked about some of the history of stuff, which I'll get into in a minute, because obviously I'm very familiar with the history of Blockbuster, working there for 5 years. But regardless, they could have definitely toned down some of the interviews, especially in the second half of this the documentary. They spent a lot of time on it, and it just wasn't as interesting as the first half. And it wasn't because I lost interest in the Blockbuster aspect or the nostalgia. That's not reason why I lost interest in it throughout it. It was just because every time they'd cut to that kind of stuff, it's celebrities talking about Blockbuster. It's just not as interesting as what's actually going on with the Last Blockbuster, which is the title. That's the title of the. That's the title. It's the title. One thing that is funny is they actually show Lloyd Kaufman, who, if you don't know who that is, he did the Trauma movies. The Trauma. I said trauma movies. The trauma movies are just these movies that literally only existed because rental stores existed. Like your mom and pop rental stores existed. That was like the beauty of VHSs back in the day. It's just, and that's also the reason why you're getting all these resurgence of these really terrible movies that people made back then. You know, like Samurai Cop and Hard Ticket to Hawaii and Miami Connection. These are movies I've watched, you know, and discovered over the last 10 years. And they're just really bad in a really fun ways. And the reason all those things could exist was because the VHS was a free thing out there. So anybody could film anything, and you could just pitch it and start getting it in rental stores and share it around and do whatever with it. So, you know, and that kind of thing doesn't exist anymore for a variety of reasons, specifically with Blu-rays, because Blu-ray, the format's owned by Sony, without getting too into any of that stuff. But, you know, the at-home movies are movies that people make. You know, they just like that don't exist anymore. I mean, YouTube exists, but you know, those movies just, you're never going to see their like again. And Lloyd Kaufman, who did the trauma movies, he did Toxic Avenger. I don't know if anybody, I think that's the biggest hit that he did. And I've seen Toxic Avenger. I've never seen any of his other movies. They're definitely movies you would watch on like, with a bunch of friends and have some drinks and watch, because they're completely over the top. But he hates Blockbuster. And I knew he hated Blockbuster because I watched another documentary that he was in. I think it was called Vhs Massacre. I don't know. I'll put whatever it is over here, because hopefully that's what it is, so I don't sound like an idiot. But anyway, he was in a documentary and he talked about the rental stores and stuff like that in that, but he hates Blockbuster. And he hates Blockbuster because Blockbuster was the corporate entity that came into these different areas and, you know, basically shut down the mom and pop rental stores. And yeah, I could see why. You know, if I owned a mom and pop rental store, and they even talk about that in the Last Blockbuster, because the last Blockbuster that's open was a mom and pop rental store, and Blockbuster said they were moving to town. They offered the owner money. He's like, hey, we want to rebrand you as Blockbuster. We'll offer this distribution model, and here's what you're going to do. And he's like, well, what if I don't want to take it? Well, if you don't take it, we're going to open up a Blockbuster over here, and we're just going to put you out of business. And that's kind of how it worked, because Blockbuster had a great distribution model and brand recognition that they were generally able to come into areas and just shut down existing mom and pop stores. So, you know, Lloyd Kaufman hates it because it killed the mom and pop stores, which kind of killed, you know, the D-list movies, like the trauma movies and other movies of like, because what Blockbuster did was they focused on buying bulk and only carrying mainstream titles. So those like off-brand titles you would really never see unless you went to a mom and pop rental store. So it's kind of cool that they at least took some time to bring him in, just to kind of crap on Blockbuster. Because throughout most of the movie, obviously everybody has fond things to say about Blockbuster. All the celebrities that they bring on, you know, are all hyping up Blockbuster and their memories of Blockbuster and all this kind of stuff. And it fits in to a certain degree, but as I said, it does play itself out by the end. But it was cool that they brought in Lloyd Kaufman to do that. And as I said, the last Blockbuster was owned by somebody. He became a franchisee. So there's, for people who don't know, who never worked at Blockbuster or whatever, there was franchise stores and there was corporate stores. Now the franchise stores had a lot more freedom for pricing and different things. Whereas if you were a corporate store, which unfortunately was the one I worked at, they tell you exactly where to put everything. They give you pictures, like put this poster over here in this window spot, put this poster over here in that window spot. They tell you what movies to put on which end cap and how to lay everything out. You have some freedom on the new release wall to space things out how you want them, but for the most part, they would have us shuffle around retail items and place candy in specific areas, and just completely ridiculous oversight. They'd also obviously control your prices you could rent movies out for and stuff like that. So it was hard to really cater to a local customer when you have no control and it's all handled by corporate people. That's why all the corporate structures were the ones that went under first because they weren't able to adjust to customer habits. And I think if they had that power, Blockbuster would have lasted a little bit longer than what they did. I don't think that they would still be around necessarily or anything, but I think that you would have had more stores last longer if they had a little bit more mobility in their pricing, and give managers the ability to compete with, Netflix and stuff. One of the things that happened when I worked there was we had a Walmart across the street, a GameStop across the street. We had Redbox literally at the grocery store right next to us. And then Blockbuster started their own vending machines, and they put a Blockbuster vending machine across the street at a gas station. And I'm like, now we're competing with ourselves, and it was just ridiculous. And there was just no way to compete, and the store quickly went under. And I knew it was going under looking at the numbers. So it really wasn't all that surprising. They bring in Jim Keyes. So Jim Keyes was the CEO who took over. And I think, if I remember correctly, he was a former 7-Eleven CEO. Some of the things he instituted, I was behind. Some things I was not. Mainly, he really wanted to focus on retail. Like, he made this really big push for selling retail in the store, which was terrible. You go to Blockbuster to rent movies, and Blockbuster makes 100% profit on the previously rented stuff that we sell. So that's the stuff we should be pushing because that's 100% profit. Our margins on retail was not that much, and we would get a bunch of retail copies in. And again, we literally have a Walmart across the street and a GameStop. So when we get a game in, people didn't come to Blockbuster to buy the game. They went to GameStop. When a movie came out that they wanted to buy, they'd go to Walmart because they could get it for $5 cheaper across the street. So, we got all this product in and we never sold it, really. Very rarely would we sell no retail. So I was not a big fan of Jim Keyes when he took over Blockbuster. That's also part of the problem with, corporate versus franchise stores. And that's the main reason why this store stayed open. That's also why the stores in Alaska stayed open, or part of the reason. Now, I actually did go to Alaska in 2015 and 2016. I went to Alaska. I didn't go to the Anchorage store, which is the one that they talked about in the documentary, but I went to the other ones that were further north in Fairbanks and North Pole, Alaska. I went to both of those Blockbusters, and it was cool going through them. I even bought a couple of things that are back on my shelf. I bought previously rented, and they work fine. I got great deals on them at the time. Both of those stores closed, and obviously the Anchorage store closed. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a documentary called The Last Blockbuster. Because it wouldn't be the last one, would it? Here's a couple pictures. Obviously, the one in North Pole, you had these barricades up and stuff. It was interesting. Now, the one in Fairbanks was a little bit bigger Blockbuster and more of a classic Blockbuster. That's just me looking up at the ticket sign there. So I think what a lot of people are realizing now, especially, is that Netflix and these streaming services are extremely convenient. I have nothing against them. I use them. I think that they have a place. But I also think physical media has a place. Obviously, I still buy physical media. There's multiple things that physical media has over streaming. There's things that streaming has over physical media. It's not an either-or argument. But the thing that physical media and a rental stores had over streaming is there's no personal touch. There's no personal touch to these movies. When you walked into a rental store and you had somebody who worked there, like me, I knew a lot of the regulars that came in, right? I knew what kind of movies they liked. They knew what kind of movies I liked, and I could recommend things to them. Something new comes out, I'd be like, yeah, you probably will like this. You probably won't like this. And I told people multiple times when there was something I thought that they weren't going to like. If it was something I thought that they weren't going to like, I don't want them to rent it. Because then my credibility shot, and then they're not going to rent anything. So you can rent way more by telling people not to rent. I know that's kind of counterproductive, as I was told by one district manager who came in. But regardless, that's the way I felt, and I think that's the way you maintain customers. And you lose out on that personal recommendation. You lose out on that conversation that you can have with somebody about movies, you don't get that. And that's a part of the reason why a lot of people scroll through everything on these streaming services without being able to find anything. I've done it multiple times. I'll sit there and scroll through whatever for a half hour before I'm just like, all right, there's nothing I want to watch. I'll put on an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine or Star Trek TNG or whatever. That's usually my go-to when I can't find anything, as a Star Trek episode. Yeah, that happens. So you lose out on that personal recommendation, and you're not really going to ever get that again, because rental stores will never come back. You might get a couple, like a novelty rental stores, I think, pop up at some point, then really won't be rental stores. They'll probably just be movie-oriented stores. But I don't know. I see physical media dying, so I think the Last Blockbuster will eventually close, if nothing else. Eventually, these studios are not going to put out physical media anymore. I mean, that's just the way I feel. I talk physical media a lot on this channel. That's also why I wanted to talk about this documentary, besides just generally doing reviews on the channel. And yeah, it's kind of sad. I hope that they don't. But Disney in particular looks like they're trying to phase out physical media. It looks like they're trying to phase out the movie theater experience. And these are things that we've had. And I think a lot of this stuff can work in tandem as long as there's an audience for it. But if you don't give the audience the option, the audience misses out, and you guys miss out on potential revenue. So I think I've talked enough about some of my thoughts on Blockbuster, although I have plenty more. They close out the documentary with Smash Mouth, as it should be. Smash Mouth, that's the way you should close a Blockbuster documentary out. So again, for me, I think your enjoyment of this documentary is really going to be based on how fondly you remember Blockbuster, how fondly you remember rental stores. If you're in the mood for nostalgia, you're obviously going to be predisposed to enjoying this. As I said before, obviously I liked it on the level that I like rental stores, I like physical media, and I worked at Blockbuster. So on that level, I was already predisposed to liking it. And so I liked it. I liked all the stuff that they had with that. Again, the celebrities, I think that they went too heavy on. They definitely could have dialed back on that. I think it creates a lot of filler. A lot of these interviews, it's like they were trying to fill out a runtime for a whole documentary because they didn't have enough footage or material to make a whole documentary just kind of on the Last Blockbuster, on Sandy the manager and stuff. So they kind of they put in all these interviews. There's like a 15, I'd say it's like a 15, maybe 20 minute. It felt really long. It's like 15 minutes probably. You got the guy from that did the documentary, Super High Me. He goes to the store and he's walking around and he's like, it's Blockbuster, which is cool. I mean, that's a fine reaction, but as an ending to a documentary, we've already had over an hour of people reminiscing about Blockbuster and stuff. So it didn't really have any impact. And I just felt like a lot of that stuff felt like filler in the documentary. So the documentary is definitely not the best documentary I've ever seen, but I'd say it's mid-tier documentary for me, just objectively. Although I enjoyed it, I've got better documentaries back there that I would recommend. But again, if you like rental stores, I would definitely recommend watching it, especially since you can watch it on Netflix. If you already have Netflix, why not? Again, I bought it, as I've said, because I like physical media. And it seemed appropriate to buy, a documentary on Blockbuster and not stream a Blockbuster documentary on Netflix. That seemed appropriate. So hopefully this wasn't too long-winded, guys. I feel like this is kind of be cut into a pretty long review, but I had a lot to say, obviously. And I really just want to thank you all for watching this. I did put up a poll for subscribers on my community tab. Thank you to everyone who voted on that. I was asking what other types of videos you would like to see on the channel. Obviously, I talk about physical media, and that's kind of the main things I talk about on the channel. But I started the channel with reviews, so I listed reviews, pop culture news, fan casts, and video essays. And reviews seem to be the thing you wanted the most, so here's a review. So I'll definitely be picking up some reviews again and interlacing those. Video essays, I'm actually working on a new series of video essays that I'm looking forward to. It's basically character focused, so I'm picking characters in pop culture, examining their character traits and all kinds of cool stuff in those videos. So I'm just working on how to format that. So a lot of cool stuff coming up on the channel. So thank you, subscribers. Thank you to you everyone who checked out this video. And if you like this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, or don't. I'm not a beggar. I'm Geechu64, and I'll always tell you the truth.